You.
Hi. Um, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm actually down at the encampment. I had gate duty today, so I'm here. So I'm presenting from here. So I'm hoping the audio is good. There are every now and then a little cluster of graduating students goes by, and it gets a little loud, but hopefully overall you'll be able to hear me fine. Okay, so I guess we're just gonna flip to the slides if we could, please. Okay, so as it says, it's just a presentation about the Know Your Rights session. So we'll just go through the four main things that you should really know that your rights about your rights at protests. Um, and of course, I just noticed that somebody spelled defense like an American, not Canadian. But yeah, I'll just go through this. So next slide, please. Okay, so I'm Gisela, as mentioned. I'm actually not a lawyer, but I will do my best to answer any questions that you have at the end of this. At Actions, you'll usually find us, legal observers, in the bright orange hats or bright orange armbands. And lately, in the summertime, we've been wearing bright orange jerseys. Just whatever the action is, we'll usually let you know up front what it is in order to find us. So next slide, please. So the Movement Defense Committee is a committee of the Law Union. We're an autonomous working group, technically, of the Law Union of Ontario. And so we will work with any group that requests support for an action as long as they're committed to anti-racist and anti-oppression principles. Um, yeah, the presentation also has been developed by the Community Justice Collective, who you may, if you've been following the situation with the encampment, they're part of the team for the students during the injunction hearings. Yeah, you'll see Seema on TV quite a bit, or in the media quite a bit, as one of the key lawyers. So next, please. Okay, so this is where I get to do my land acknowledgement and tell you that land acknowledgements are usually very wrong. Okay. So um, I am here. I am the descendant of a stolen people on a stolen land, and the stolen people part, if you saw me, is pretty obvious. The stolen land part is a little bit less obvious. So we often hear about Treaty 13 and Toronto land purchase, but the reality is that the standard land acknowledgement that you hear at things like this is both inadequate and inaccurate. So the first Toronto purchase, which was understood by the Mississaugas, it's a little bit surprised to them that it was a purchase, thought it was a renewal of their alliance with the British and not a sale of land at all. And this resulted in the British realizing later that they had no valid deed for much of what was then known as Upper Canada. So, through deceit and pressure tactics, they coerced the Mississaugas, who were already struggling with the devastation of colonization on their communities, to sign an agreement to sell some of their land. Despite this, in 1998, the Mississaugas filed a claim against the Canadian state for unlawfully stealing that land that had never been part of that purchase. And the government settled with them for millions of dollars. But in addition to this, since 2015, and to the best of my knowledge to this very minute, they still have an ongoing land claim in the colonial courts called the Rouge Tract claim. And it asserts that their title over a large tract of land that includes the eastern half of Toronto remains unextinguished. The Anishinaabeg Nation, which includes Mississaugas and Chippewa, states that they have never ceded or surrendered any of their lands, period. So I believe, therefore, that for people in a struggle against settler colonialism, we must also reject the legitimacy of the so-called Toronto Purchase. And then daily we hear people justifying the current most media prominent genocide as an Indigenous people reclaiming their land. But they don't mean that they would be fine with the people of the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, the Anishinaabeg, the Mississaugas of the Credit, or the Chippewa Nations marching them from their homes at gunpoint. There are those of us who are allowed to reclaim our lands, and I use reclaim in quotes, and those of us who are not. There are those of us who are allowed to be the marchers at gunpoint, and the rest of us are the marched. So I feel like land acknowledgements should be the domain of the marchers, for they are the ones who most need reminding. Next. Yes, okay. I guess also I should probably go a little bit into the history of the police. So the police in North America are a combination in the states of the, let's say, psychological descendants of slave catchers, and in Canada they are the Northwest, were they Northwest Mounted Police? Yeah, which was largely used to round up and oppress the Indigenous people. So the primary function of the police has managed to remain the same in that it is about protecting private property. So who keeps us safe? We keep us safe. Okay, next slide, please. So we're going to go through your main rights as vis-a-vis, well, dealing with the police in general. It's not just at protests. So first of all, you have the right to be left alone. You have the right to speak to a lawyer. You have a right to silence and a right to privacy. And they manifest themselves as, next slide, please. The right to be left alone. So if you are stopped by a cop and you are on foot, then the police are allowed to talk to you, but you're free to walk away at any time. So they can talk to you, you don't have to talk to them. But before you walk away, you should make sure that you are not being detained by asking politely, am I being detained or am I free to go? Now, since Tavis has gone out the window, that's just the carding rights of cops to just randomly stop and check people's ID, they have to have a reason to at least suspect you in order to stop. They're not allowed to stop you based on racial profiling. They're not allowed to stop you, randomly. You have to be either doing something or they have to have some sort of reason. And they have to tell you why they're stopping you. So if the police tell you that you're free to go, or I would say if they say anything other than, yes, you are being detained, you are free to go, because they will try to obfuscate. Sometimes they will hem and haw, they will make vague threats. But if they don't actually say that you are being detained, walk away. There's no good talking to the police. No good ever comes of talking to the police. So next slide, please. Okay. So the first thing that we like people to kind of repeat, just so that they get, a sense, because sometimes it's hard in the moment if you don't practice sometimes saying things in advance, to just force yourself to say the thing, is just say out loud, am I free to go? Say it to yourself. Okay, so next slide, please. So if you are being detained, so this is now, they have answered in the affirmative that, they've answered in the negative that you are not in fact free to go, that you are being detained. Okay. So you have a right to resist unlawful arrests, but that right comes into play as after the effect, the court will maybe make rectification of it. So, I mean, you could resist, but it's generally just going to cause you pain. And it's just going to, it's the saying is that rights are corrective, not preventive. because the courts will correct something that's been done incorrectly, but having the right does not actually prevent bad things from happening to you. So the police have to have a reason, not just a suspicion that you've been doing something, in order to arrest you without a warrant. And they must tell you what that reason is. And if you think that the arrest or detention is illegal, resisting is physically very risky. It's risky, and then they will just add the charge of either resisting arrest or assault officer. Those are the two things that they kind of like to do here. So next slide, please. Oh, there. So I don't know whether this is relevant in this particular context, but if you're under 17, between 12 and 17, that is, you have a right to have your parents or another adult speak with you when you speak to the police. I mean, they can't just approach people underage. They have a right to the lawyer and parents or another adult with you when the police question you. And the police are required by law to notify the parents. And the police are also required to consider whether they should be releasing you with just a warning. I mean, they're required to, as opposed to, oh, I don't know what that is. That is very not. Okay, next slide, please. So everybody, regardless of age, has the right to speak to a lawyer. So if you're detained or you're arrested, you have the right to speak to the lawyer of your choice. And the police are supposed to tell you that you have the right to speak to the lawyer of your choice. If you don't have a lawyer, there's a lawyer basically on call, the duty counsel. And since you have a right to a bail hearing, the duty counsel will be the person to walk you through the bail hearing. If you're at a protest and MDC is on, okay. Sorry, 1 second. I'm just going to ask very nicely for them to stop drumming.
I can try if they're scheduled.
Okay, so sorry, I'm just trying to make that noise go away. I don't know actually if you can hear that noise. Hopefully you can't. All right, so at the point you ask to speak to a lawyer, the police are supposed to stop talking to you. But they don't actually do that. They will probably keep trying to vaguely threaten you, make some suggestions that it's in your best interest to talk to them. It says here that the police must hold off questioning, but in actual practicality, that doesn't happen. They keep, and one thing I don't think people understand well enough is that police are allowed to lie to you. There is nothing that says the police cannot tell the biggest lie on the planet or make fake deals with you. They are allowed to lie to you, and they will continue to lie to you. Or they will continue to talk to you. So if you ask, the police are supposed to give you an opportunity to speak privately to your lawyer. And again, if MDC is on call, that will take you through to the bail hearing. So, you'll end up with at least a movement lawyer rather than the duty counsel getting you through that stage. One of the things I've discovered lately, more and more, I mean, it used to happen kind of intermittently, but now it's just kind of a nonstop thing. Police at actions or after actions, telling you that they can't get through to the lawyer. If you've been arrested, they say to you that they can get through the lawyer, that they've left a voicemail, and on the other end, they're kind of dicking the lawyer around. They won't let the lawyer actually through to you for hours. They will do this as long as they can. They try to draw out the process. So the exception is if you are in a car, you do have to answer the police, and there's no right to a lawyer at a routine traffic stop. So next slide, please. Okay, so again, the thing to practice is saying that I would like to speak to a lawyer now. All right, next slide, please. Your third right is the right to remain silent. There's not a lot that you should take away from American TV shows, but this one thing applies here. And this is the right that you should absolutely hold to, right? You do not have to speak to the cops, and you should not speak to the cops. You may think that if you just explain to the cops, that'll make things better, but oftentimes what you'll do is you'll confirm that you were in a place that they didn't necessarily have confirmation for, or you will give away information that they didn't have. So it's not helpful to speak to the police. Do not speak to the police. You don't have to answer any of their questions, unless you're on a bicycle. Yeah. Also, this too. You don't actually have to identify yourself. We usually say it's wise to give tombstone information, that is your name and date of birth, if you want things to go a little smoothly, a little faster, but you don't actually have to by law. It just will take a lot longer and drag the process out. But if you are on a bicycle, the police can stop you if they think you've broken a law or a municipal bylaw. You have to then give them your name and address. So, and if you refuse, they can arrest you. If you lie about your name or address, you can be charged with an offense such as obstructing justice or obstructing police. These charges usually involve harsher penalties than a traffic ticket. So you're better off just doing that in that particular case. But don't lie about who you are. Just don't give them your worst enemy's name. don't try to pass it off on your sibling or something. Just give them the right information if you're giving them information at all, because giving false information is a criminal offense. So, yeah, that's just looking at the exceptions here. Oh yeah, if you're a passenger in a vehicle, though, you don't have to identify yourself. We'll go on to the next slide, please. Okay, again, so a little more on the right to silence. What if you're being questioned? Yeah, no, yeah, you still have the right to remain silent. They can stand there and question all they like. They can threaten, cajole, lie. You do not have to speak to them. You might want to say that you're asserting your right to silence, but you don't even have to do that. Now, there are some keys. If you do decide to speak to them, don't sign anything until you speak to your lawyer. Do not sign any conditions to be released. They will always say, well, you get out of here faster if you do X, Y, and Z. Especially if you've got MDC on call, your best bet is to sit there and hold tight, because they've been putting some onerous, just insanely onerous conditions on people lately. Non-association, can't be anywhere near protests, and one person had curfew put on them, like 9 p.m. They had to be home. Yeah, I'm trying to think what other things I've seen lately. Just difficult stuff. So yeah, just have to remember that anything you say will be used against you, but it will not be used to help you. So you may think otherwise, but so oh, there we go. Police are allowed to lie to you, trick you, and pretend they're your friends. Oh yeah, the chatty cops, even before before any of this process, when they start chatting with you and being all friendly, they're just trying to get intel. They're not your friends. Yeah. Yeah. And it's very hard. I know it's very hard sometimes when someone is repeatedly saying, scary things to remain silent, but it is in your best interest. That is your bottom line. It is just do not explain, do not make excuses.
We will. She came in and brought a flag, so.
Do, just be quiet. Next slide, please. Okay. So again, just to practice it so it flows in the moment, is just say, I want to remain silent. Okay, so next slide, please. So the right to privacy. Now, police can only search you and your personal possessions, like a backpack or your pockets or your purse, in certain limited circumstances. This is without a warrant, right? So it is always a good idea to just out and out say the words, I do not consent to be searched, because again, there's the rights being corrective, not preventive. It won't actually stop them from searching you, but it may get anything they find thrown out of court afterwards. So police are allowed to do a quick pat down, and that is, they're supposed to be looking for weapons or anything that can be used to harm yourself when they detain you. So all police searches, whether they're lawful or not, have to be conducted in a reasonable manner. They are not allowed to be aggressive about it. They're not allowed to be abusive about it. And again, this is one of those things that gets corrected after the fact. It's another of those cases where having the right does not mean that you're going to be spared the abuse. It just means that after the fact in the courts, it could be fixed or addressed. Let's not say fixed. So if they are doing these things, if they're searching you in an abusive or aggressive fashion, then it's probably a violation of your rights, and you should note what happens and tell your lawyer immediately. Just as soon as you can, tell them. So the police can search you without your permission if you are arrested. Again, this is when they're supposed to be looking for weapons. It's also supposed to be to find and prevent the destruction of any evidence, and to maintain police officer safety. It's not supposed to be for anything else. Yeah, the pat down for weapons, and depending on the circumstances, they may also be able to look in your bag. And again, that's supposed to be for officer safety. If you have already been arrested, though, and you have a search clause for probation, they are allowed to search you. And if you consent to it, or sometimes if you don't verbally state that you don't consent to it, they are allowed to search you. But you don't actually have to consent to it. But again, if you try to get between the cops and your backpack or something, then you're likely going to be charged with obstruction. Right, next.
Because he's a big guy. I know what you're gonna.
So next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay, so when you're going to a protest, you want to make this as difficult as possible. You do not want to have your phone open by biometrics. So no face, no fingerprints. You want a password, because the police cannot force you to reveal your password, again, as a result of your right to remain silent. But they can still try to break into your phone. with forensic technology, and they would likely, that is, need a warrant to do that. Again, if your phone is locked biometrically with your fingerprint or your face, they can try to force you to place your finger on the sensor to unlock it. That's still unclear because no court has ruled on it yet. If you have a smart lock or some other means of keeping your phone unlocked, turn it off or set the lock instantly function so that everything's locked down with the press of one button. The other thing to do is to turn off any personal assistants like Google or Siri or Alexa so that it doesn't respond, like doesn't give an answer to something that the phone is being asked while still locked. I feel like there's one more thing. Oh yeah, also to turn your notifications off. So on the lock screen, you don't want, previews of email that came in, text messages, none of that stuff. You just make sure it's all off. Okay, next slide, please. So again, just for practicing and so it flows in the moment, say, I am not consenting to a search. My battery is 1%. Okay, so next slide, please. So a quick review. You have the right to be left alone. And the corresponding thing to say to assert that right is, am I free to go? You have the right to speak to a lawyer. And the corresponding thing to say is, I would like to speak to a lawyer now. You have the right to silence. And you can say, I want to remain silent. And the right to privacy. And the equivalent statement is, I am not consenting to a search. So next slide, please. Any questions so far? Let's actually see if there's any in the chat. Messages in the chat.
So far,
Yes.
there aren't any questions in the
Yeah,
chat.
I see someone with a hand up.
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Noesa.
Hi, Gisela. Thank you for this. Yeah, one question I have is regarding the search, because they're known for strip searching Black women in public spaces. So,
Yeah.
it's one thing to say I'm not consenting to a search. Well,
Yep.
how do you handle it if they try to make you take your clothes off? Like in a park or something,
Yeah, in a park or something. Yeah,
where people can see you.
I know. I mean, this is one of those things that they're not allowed to do it. They're not supposed to do it. And it will get sort of corrected in court, but it's, in the moment, I like I don't recommend that you fight it because it's just going to get you hurt in addition to everything else. It's one of those extraordinarily shitty things. And I I mean, you can remind them that they're not allowed to do it. And this is one of those things I also teach people to do cop watch. If you have someone else there, even if they're not recording, even if they're just standing there, it just reminds them that they are accountable, right? Just someone there who can witness what's happening. I mean, I would love to say that there is a magic phrase for that, but there isn't. And I mean, yeah, we've seen Black and Indigenous people being abused by the police since day one. I don't actually have an answer for you.
Okay, I thought I would just put it out there anyway.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wish I had something. Anyone else?
Does anyone else have a question for Gisela?
If not, we will go on to the
I,
next slide. Oh,
I had
there's
a
more
question,
slides.
Gisela.
Oh, okay.
Back of several slides ago, there was a mention of, and you talked about it, how youth from age 12 to 17, there's a different set of rules for them, right? Is
Yeah.
that up to and including 17?
Yes.
So,
Yeah, it
okay,
stops
so
at 18.
really the different set of rules kick in when a person turns 18.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You are. Okay. Can we go to the next slide? Because we're going to now talk about the limitations of your your rights, like knowing your rights. So make sure we have enough time for that. I'll do it really quickly. Yeah. So next slide, please. So there was a case very recently that was recently resolved. I think it's 2 years ago now. 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now. So the police sometimes take you knowing your rights as a personal challenge, like it's just a challenge to their authority. And because they rarely face consequences for abusing your rights, at least they personally don't. I mean, it may screw up the case, but the ramifications for them personally are pretty minimal. They often also take years to see those consequences, and the case that we often point to is the Neptune 4 case. I don't know whether people are familiar with it. Sorry, next slide, please. Oh yeah, this is stuff I mentioned earlier, that rights are corrective, not preventive. So rights are most useful after someone has been arrested and charged with a crime, and then charter violations can lead to the charges being dropped or evidence being thrown out or a lesser sentence. It's also important to know that legality isn't the main factor in determining the likelihood of arrest or police violence. So there have been actions where what's happened has been clearly illegal, but depending on who's doing the illegal thing, the cops will turn a blind eye to it. And there have been times where nothing illegal has been going on. But again, depending on the demographics of the action of the participants, there's a bunch of arrests. That will generally get thrown out, but it still serves to deter people from coming out a second time, right? Or, after like Land Day, people were terrified of the police marching horses through a protest. So, it's their goal to silence people basically and make them not use their rights. So that's why they do this stuff. Next. Okay. So quickly, I guess you have a choice whether you exert your rights in order to, like the de-arresting thing or the resisting arrest factor. If it's an illegal arrest, that's one thing, but I mean, there is the charge resisting arrest for precisely that reason. And if you can always go back to, well, what was the arrest about? And it's like, well, there was no legitimate reason for the arrest, but you were still resisting it. And it's like that you get in this logic loop and it's just nonsense. So you have to actually decide whether it's just easier to go along with their nonsense, which will make your life safer and simpler, or if you actually want to, exert your rights. Next slide, please. So the Neptune 4, there were, it was November 21st, 2011. Next slide, please. There were 4 Black kids in Lawrence Height. They were going between their mentorship program and their homes. And they were stopped by 2 police officers who said they fit the description. A favorite words. But this is back when Tavis was a thing, the carding rules, which has been tossed out. fit the description of a robbery, and they demanded their ID. So, sorry, could you just flip to the next screen? And the kids, one of the kids had taken a Know Your Right similar to this, but not from the MDC, and said, "Am I under arrest?" And that got them beaten. One of the kids was beaten so hard that it loosened his braces. And then they were charged with assaulting the police. Remember, I said that sometimes they use that in order to justify their own nonsense. And the young man who, said, "Am I under arrest?" He was charged with threatening death and assault with intent to resist arrest. I mean, all the charges got withdrawn later, but at the time, the cops drew their guns and they threatened to shoot the kids, and it was just a massive abuse of police power. Okay, so it took until January of 2021. Remember, it was 2011 that this happened. January of 2021, both of the cops were found guilty of discreditable conduct under the Ontario Police Services Act. They were found that for arresting without good and sufficient cause, Lourenco, who was the primary on the assault. Let's just call it assault. Okay, we could call it arrest, but it wasn't a legitimate arrest. The primary, he had previously been brought up twice on drinking and driving actions, and one of those charges resulted in him getting 15 days of lost pay and a demotion. But for what he did with these kids, he got 12 days. So he got less time for pointing a gun at 4 kids and threatening them and basically screwing up their lives for years than he did for drunk driving. And then Pice, who was his partner, he received 3 days of pay suspension. 9 years later, 3 days. So then in 2023, there was an update. I mean, it didn't actually result in more of a penalty for him, but it was an update that Lourenco was in fact guilty of discreditable conduct for pointing his firearm at the teens outside their home, not just the beating, but the pointing the firearms, and that it was found that the hearing officer's 2021 analysis was flawed and infected with significant errors. And Lourenco was found guilty of using excessive force for repeatedly punching one of the kids. Yeah. Anyway, so next slide, please. Okay. So, the next steps, and thank you for attending, first of all. I hope you could hear me well enough. It got quieter toward the end, I noticed. If you're in the GTA, we would love to have you come out and attend a legal observer training, because we are always looking for more legal observers. And one of the things that happens when we are few in number or not able to be present at an action is like not just last Saturday. I don't even know what day it is. Today is Friday. Was it last Saturday or the Saturday before? Very recent Saturday, we weren't able to be out at one of the actions, and there were just 4 arrests. Land Day, they didn't start abusing people until we were down to 2 LOs. So if you are able to take the legal observer training and come out and show up, it is hugely helpful in protecting actions. Again, if you are able to make any sort of donation to the MDC to keep us going and help us keep coming out to things, there's a e-transfer address on the screen there. And then if you want more information about us as an organization, you can go to movementdefense.org.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much, Gisela. Does anyone have any questions for Gisela?
Oh,
I
another
have a
question.
Go
yeah,
ahead,
I
Marcella.
have a question. Sometimes people would film the um activities of cops on citizens, and I've seen at least one video where a cop said, "Oh, that's evidence. I need to take your phone." So, what is your advice on people recording
Live
incidents?
stream. Live stream. Honestly, yeah, live streaming is your best thing because it's like, well, it's already out there.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, they can't do that because it's not against the law to record the cops, and it is only evidence if you had caught the quote unquote offense. It is not evidence to record them arresting someone. Like that's like the flimsiest. I mean, I in no way doubt that they do that because I have seen some atrocious things. So yeah, it's not supposed to be a thing that they do.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Thank you. I've been involved with some housing advocacy and tenants advocacy lately, and I am concerned about my neighbors who have hearing impairments and English is not their first language. Do you have any rights to an interpreter or translation or
You do actually have a right if they're supposed to make access accommodations for you. Well, I'm gonna lie and say that I've seen them do some really just I should probably not use the word shitty, but that's just the word for it. Stuff with disabled people. When they do arrests, sometimes they take away mobility aids, sometimes they withhold, medication, sometimes they're not supposed to do this. And again, this is the sort of thing that um, influences the judge's decision on bail and on further hearings, but it doesn't actually stop them from doing it in advance. So it's just good to be aware of that. And I think that's the rest of our role in these things to help, you know, put our bodies between the like. There's a hierarchy of who the cops are going to target, and just have to kind of know what that hierarchy is and where you can be willing to stop stuff from happening.
thank you.
Go ahead, Noesa.
Thank you, Gisela. I have another question. So in terms of being what you call yourself LOs, like did you say legal observer?
Legal observer, yeah, just
Do we
internally, informally, we call them LOs, but yeah.
okay. Do we have to identify? Can we just because I like to do things like on the sly. So do we have to identify that that's what we're doing? I mean, as a
Okay,
visibly Black
so there's
person, I don't want them really to because they will target me. I know that.
well, I mean, there's two different things. So when we're doing legal observing with the MDC specifically, um, like it's different because you're part of a network of people, right? And there's a lawyer. If anything happens to you at the action, you're backed up by a team of lawyers. Now, if you're talking about just doing straight cop watch, like not an official action that you've got the team behind you at, that you don't have to. You have no need to identify at all.
Okay, thank you.
Gisela, I had a question. Recently, I was talking to a legal observer who um, had been at one of the recent ceasefire now rallies, and she witnessed four people in the participating in the rally being arrested, and she was saying to me that she was trying to get the people's names and their birth dates before the police could haul them away. And she said that that would help the legal observers and the backup, the lawyers working to help out, get people out on bail get them released sooner because they could
Yes.
they could you talk to that?
Okay. So when we're at an action and we witness, um, people getting taken away, like it's gotten worse in the last couple of years. It used to be that you could call out, somebody could call back what their name is so we can get that thing. Or we would ask people's friends at the action, who it was that was getting arrested. It's when the lawyer, so what we do is we take that information, or we tell the lawyer as much information as we can get at any given point in time. Oh, it is going to rain. The the first thing I'll do usually is call in and say there's been an arrest, and I'm going to get, just to give them a heads up that we'll be calling them back, and we'll have more information for them. So then usually I try to call back with as much information as I have it. So we usually go to the friends of the person that was being arrested or anybody around to try to get names and information, because the lawyer who's going to do the jail calls to find out bail hearing information, and if they're being released on their own recognizance, um, they it's helpful for them to actually be able to identify which person or people that have been arrested on that particular day are they're calling in for. So, if we can get their name and birth date, that's super helpful, right? It makes it harder for the cops to pretend that they don't know who the person's talking about. I'm in the last, I don't know, year, it's just kind of actually just gone like this, right? Like it's getting worse. The cops have been, oh, they used to do this actually. No, they used to actually move people from one division to another division. They did that last weekend. Get told first that they're 52, and then it's like, no, they're at 14, and then at the end we all went to 11, because they will sometimes move people from one precinct to another to just obfuscate, to make it harder. Um, it's just the games the cops play. So the more information that you have, the better it is for the lawyer trying to track them down and get them released.
I take from that it would be a good idea for people attending a rally, a march, or demonstration to have a buddy,
Yes,
so
very
that
much so.
and their buddy knows their name, knows their
Yes.
birth date, so that they can then work with a legal observer to help get that person out. Am I correct on that?
Very much so. Very.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Alex, and then there's a question. I just seeing a question in the chat, but first we'll go to Alex.
Thank you. So I hear advice back and forth about keeping information about legal defense. I remember back at the G20, it was recommended, some people were recommending that you write the legal defense phone number on your arm. And then other people were saying that's not a good idea because, if you need to disperse in a hurry, then that just signals to the police that you were involved in the demonstration.
Yeah, we've been getting people to, well, it depends on the action. So, sometimes if you're not doing anything that's going to get you snatched, say in the subway, then arm is okay. But we often just say like write it on your stomach or something that's not visible to the cops, but that you yourself can see if you do need the number after the fact.
Thank you.
There's a question in the chat. I'll read it to you, Gisela. It says, could you kindly advise on situations where you can ask for an officer's badge number and name?
Oh, you can ask for it anytime. Sometimes if it's a really big action, I'll actually Okay, they're apparently going to do the Gaza chant. I hope you can still hear me. um, the I'll assign a LO to. Oh, drumming starts at 6. Okay, oops, I guess that's why. uh, I'll actually assign an LO to just kind of walk around and collect badge numbers and names before anything happens, just to know who's on site. So, but yeah, they aren't. I mean, I've seen them hide their names and badge numbers, but they're not actually allowed to do that.
Would you recommend if someone has been detained, is being questioned by a cop, would you advise them to ask the officer's name, or do you think that would just aggravate them?
If their name is not visible, if you can see their name, just make that note. Their name is on their chest and their badge number is on the shoulder. If it's what are they now? They are the PSRT. Sorry, they rebranded. They used to be PSU. The PSRT, the Public Safety Response Team, actually have their badge numbers on their hats. So they're very easily grabbed. Although, at Lamport, there was so many cops that were covering up their badge numbers and their names. So, it depends on the action. It's just, but you do have a right to ask. So, I mean, if they're making it difficult, although if they're making it difficult by covering it up, they're probably also not going to answer you. So that's.
Go ahead, Noesa.
How do they go about covering it up? Like, do they put tape on it or their hand? Like, what
Oh
do they
yeah,
do?
yeah. I've seen them cover it with their hands. I've seen them, put a little patch that just covers it up. Yeah, it's just,
Or if they have
or they
something
or they put. As they have their. Some of them have the mics, and they'll just conveniently have the mic blocking the badge number. So yeah.
Go ahead, Val.
I just have a question. If members are attending a rally or any type of action organized by USW, and for whatever reason police are involved, would the USW help support them in any legal issues they might have just from participating?
Well, that's a good question. There have been rallies, demonstrations, marches that USW, or the International Union, has played a primary role in organizing. And I've seen in those situations, our international union uh, indicating that if one of our members came had to experience an interaction with the police that, for instance, ended up in arrest, that the legal department would be available. Uh, what the one that comes immediately to my mind is the anti-FTAA demonstration in 2001, was it? 2002, in Quebec City, where the steelworkers paid for a charter train to Quebec City from Toronto and had hundreds of members join the protests against the planned FTAA at the meetings of the different countries who wanted to implement that trade agreement. And we certainly they had indicated that the national offices legal department would be available, but I typically not. But there are some rallies, as I said, when they're very much a primary organizer, that they have done that.
Thank you.
All right, it's starting to rain here.
Well, it's starting to rain on Gisela, and I think the drumming sounds like it's going to start soon,
Yeah.
Gisela.
Yep.
So I think this is probably a really good time to wrap up. I just want to thank you very much on behalf of the local, the executive and the membership for joining us today and really providing us with a lot of useful information. And you presented it really clearly, and it was greatly appreciated. We appreciate your facilitating this. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I
Thank
hope we
you.
see you out soon at something. Yeah. I hope some
But
of you will consider doing the legal observer training.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Is that it, John? We go?
Yes, I think that we'll